with his beloved right now, back east, wherever that, Colorado.
He's at a meeting out of town.
Okay. When's he going out there? It sounds like he's ready to move out there, right?
He's pretty much moved there. But he's...
העולם אשר קדישנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה, לעסוק בדברי תורה, לעסוק בדברי תורה, לעסוק בדברי תורה, לעסוק b'divrei Torah. Okay, so since a few have not seen this, we're going to go a very quick recap of the last few weeks, at least some highlights. Okay, we are a people of the book. We're a people of the name specifically. Okay, in the Torah, and the Torah is the first of three parts. It is not called the Old Testament. The Tanakh is the Hebrew Scriptures. We don't say Old Testament because that implies there's a new one, and we don't accept that. Tanakh is an acronym. It stands for Torah. It's the first 5 books. Nevi'im, which means prophets, and Ketuvim, which means writings. It is not the Old Testament. In the Christian scriptures, the Old Testament includes some other things, and it's in a different order. The Torah, the first 5 books. And in these books, we call God by the name of Yud, He, Vav, and He. Right? Yud, He, Vav, He. When it says that we are made in the image of God, if you take the Yud, He, Vav, and He, it looks like a human being. Right? So that's the image of God that we're made. It is in the name. We refer to the name as Adonai, meaning my master, or Hashem, meaning the name. If you have a question, just jump it in and yell at me because I'm used to it. And everything is based on this name. This is the skeleton key that opens up every part of every service, every part of Jewish theology, every part of Jewish liturgy. Everything can be opened up through that name. Why do we not pronounce it? Because in Hebrew, there are, when you have the Hebrew letters, you put the vowels underneath, dots and dashes. Okay? But in the Torah, there are no vowels. So you have to know what the words are. Since these are all soft letters, the Yud can be pronounced Y, J, or silent. The He can be H or silent. The Vav can be V, W, O, U. And the He can be He or silent. We don't want to offend God by calling him Yahuwah or Yehowoho. So instead, we just call him the name Hashem, or Adonai, meaning my master. In the same way that you might not like it if your name was called, instead of calling you Stephen, we called you Stefanu. You might not like that so much, so we refer to it that way. Okay? The first piece to understand. Judaism is very much, this is the manual from which all things are based, but Judaism is very much about a couple of things. Number one, action versus faith. We do not believe that faith leads to action, but rather action leads to faith. So in Catholicism, you can choose to say, I'm a bad guy, I do all sorts of bad things. But the priest forgives you before death, you're forgiven. In Judaism, you actually have to make it right. We are all about action, and that the right actions will lead us to an understanding and relationship with faith with God. We need to also have this concept in Judaism. Again, I'm kind of going over the last 4 weeks or whatever in before the holidays in a very brief way. We need to understand that we have what's called a portable homeland. When the Dalai Lama was thrown out of Tibet, the first people he met with were rabbis. And the reason is because we have done something successfully no other culture in the history of the world has done. We've been thrown off our indigenous land, and we have survived in the same way we were. And that's because we created this portable homeland of a Siddur, a prayer book, of the Tanakh, that we used all this and through our rituals. Okay? That's why he met with us before anything else. So there's some basic, just underlying statements of all of it. I want to go back just to give an idea, because we're going to catch back up to where we are right now. But I want to go back to the idea. It says very clearly in the Torah, right, that Ha-Adam is created. And how many of us have heard that Eve was created from Adam's rib. Therefore, women should be subservient to men, right, Fiona? We have you on tape saying that now. So we'll send that to Stan, please, as a fundraiser. But that's not true. Ha means the. So ha-Adam is created, and that means the human being. When Adam puts ha-Adam to sleep, he splits ha-Adam into Adam and Eve. So if I can borrow the two of you, Steve and Fiona, if you both come up here for a sec. Come on, Doc. So it says, he created them. In his image, male and female, he created them. But it's one creature. Turn back to back. So this becomes ha-Adam. Male on one side, female on the other side. Connected at the rib in the back. But they're alone. They have no relationship. And so God puts them to sleep, splits them apart, and now you have Adam and Eve, and no longer is either of them called ha-Adam. It's Adam and Chava. That's different than what you learned in church. Thank you. Okay, it's very different, isn't it? But that's what the text says. Okay, the text refers to ha-Adam. So there's subtleties in the text that cannot be understood without studying it in Hebrew. Because any translation by definition is interpretation. You have questions that are about to pop out. Feel free to just pop them out, okay? It's like, and then it's like, wait, no, I don't have any questions now. So that's as an example of things that are subtleties in the Hebrew that aren't in the English. And it's why we need to translate and really work at things. So if you look at your handout, actually, we don't need to go into that Kabbalah piece, but to give an example of the power of what Hebrew letters and how we use them. The words and the letters themselves have power. So this is the Hebrew letter Aleph. Okay? That's what it looks like. I like the orange. The orange comes out nice. I'm going to use orange. That's the Hebrew letter Aleph. It is the only silent letter in the Hebrew alphabet. In modern Hebrew, we don't pronounce the ayin, but in ancient Hebrew, ayin was pronounced. It was pronounced ayin. So you wouldn't have said Shema, you would have said Shema. Now you know why we pronounce it silently. Okay. This is the only truly silent letter. First letter of the alphabet. So it has the numerical value of 1. Right? A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, etc. Okay? Just like Roman numerals. But this letter can also be broken apart by, this is done in a text called Sefer Yetzirah and Sefer Bahir, can be broken down to look as 2 yuds, right, because that's a yud, and a vav. Does that make sense? Do you guys see how these 3 letters, the yud, and the vav, are hidden right in there? Yes? Yes? Okay. Since vav has the numerical value of 6, and yud has 10, and yud has 10, that means the other value of Aleph is 26. You guys all catch that so far? You with me? Okay. If you go back to God's name of Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, Yud is 10, Vav or Hey is 5, Vav is 6, Hey is 5, which means God's name is also equal to 26. And so we say that the only way to really understand God is in true silence. This is when your spirit, your soul, is quiet. What else do we learn? Okay, and this is again understanding that in Judaism, letters and numbers are deeply integrated together. The word in Hebrew for love is ahava. Okay? It is spelt Aleph, Hey, Bet, Hey, which is 1 plus 5 plus 2 plus 5. So it's 13. 13 plus 13 equals 26. So we say when you really can feel and experience God's love for you and you can really experience your love for God, now you know what the name of God really means. Did I lose anybody? Okay, yes. Did I lose you or are you with me? Come on, just toss it. Come on. You don't have to. I'm going to call your son if you're going to be quiet.
Call him. It's all right.
So does that make sense? Okay. So these are just some basic understandings of. I want you to see how, because we're going over the last 4 weeks in just a few minutes, to understand again that numbers and letters are connected in Hebrew, that words have more meaning than just their word, and that words are connected with other words. So I have a 2-volume set that's only for freaks like me. That is, every word in the Torah and what it equates to numerically. So that this word has this, if the word for this has one numerical value and another word has the same numerical value, there's a correlation. There's a partnership or relationship between them. Make sense? Okay. We ended up where we left. So that was just some basic things as we're going to study some text. So, perfect timing. We're actually not that far. I want to go, before we go into where we left off, which was Vayrai, let's go back to the Torah and let's go to chapter 12, verse 1. Okay. Would someone please read the first few lines of the first line of chapter? This one doesn't like to erase. It's not good. As much as I like the orange. So would someone please read chapter 12, verse 1? This is the first time God is going to ever speak to Avram. He's not any Abraham yet. His name is just Avram. And the first time that he's going to be spoken to. Someone please read.
Okay. Hashem said to Abram, "Go for yourself from your land and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you, I will curse. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you."
Okay. The word lech, which is what the Hebrew says, the first word, means go. And it doesn't mean just go nicely. It's a command for version, saying go. Okay. Lecha can be understood as meaning to yourself, with yourself, for yourself, by yourself, into yourself. Okay. So the first words that God says to Avram, literally, are lech lecha, go into yourself, to yourself, with yourself, by yourself, for yourself. Ma'artzacha, from your land. Meledecha, from the place of your birth. Umibeit avicha, and from the house of your father. El haaretz asher arecha, to a place that I will show you. The very first words said to the very first Jew are go meditate. Because what is meditation? Other than going into yourself, with yourself, by yourself, for yourself, into yourself, and receiving and going someplace different than you know. Judaism is by definition a meditative tradition. Now let's talk for a minute about what that means. In meditation, we get into what's called a heightened state of awareness, or unitary state of consciousness, or unitary state of being. From our brain chemistry, you remember all of your junior high biology, you have the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system. Remember that stuff? You better remember that stuff, or you should retire. So, right, that's the fear, the either fight and flight or relaxation, right? When your brain is trapped and you're in an altered state of consciousness, either through meditation, through prayer, athletics, getting into the zone, having an orgasm, there's any number of ways, having done a psychotropic and a ritual, any number of ways to change your brain chemistry. When you are in that space, your brain chemistry changes. The sympathetic and parasympathetic systems shut down because they overflow. They get overflowing and they shut down. The hippocampus, which is about right here, aren't you pleased that you didn't know I knew all this about stuff? He's also not only a friend and a man I love very much, he also is my doctor in some ways. So when it comes to parts, my doctor. So your hippocampus becomes 400% more active. That there is, when you're in a meditative state, when you're in an altered state of consciousness, we track the brain. We know what happens. What happens when the Kyoto monks, when Buddhist monks are in deep meditation, what happens to the man who's having an orgasm, and what happens to someone when they're dreaming, it's all the same brain chemistry. Very, very close. So the first words are, go meditate.
What does the hippocampus do again?
That I can't tell you what it normally does.
Okay.
You can ask him, do you remember what the hippocampus does? It just becomes overly active at that point. And it happens when you're having dreams and things. So what is Judaism at its essence? It is a meditative tradition of action. It's not a recipe to do whatever. It's not a a pattern to say, okay, this is how I what is that? What do you,
I looked it up.
what, the hippocampus?
Hippocampus is a part of the brain that plays crucial roles in memory, spatial navigation, and emotional regulation.
And it becomes significantly more active.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you, Rabbi Google. So, so what do we have is Judaism is a tradition of meditation and action combined. So we're actually much more consonant with Buddhism than we are with Catholicism. We're more consonant with Native American traditions than we are with Christianity. Okay, so it's very much based that way. All of our prayers, our rituals, our ceremonies are designed in order to put us in a meditative state, into a receptive state, into a more open place. That's what we do, so that we can say Hineni. Throughout the Tanakh, Abraham, Jacob, Moses, Hezekiah, all these guys are asked by God, Ayecha, where do you stand? And they say, Hineni, I'm present. I would contend that all of us are asked by life, always, every moment, where do you stand? And the people who remember as having made a difference have the courage, ability, and willingness to express it and say, here's where I stand. And Judaism is about knowing where you stand, even though the sands are always shifting, knowing where and how you stand. Okay? So our tradition is very, very much about how we meditate, how we get into that place, which so let me back up a little bit. The second temple is destroyed in 70 of the Common Era. Now we have a problem. Our rituals were all based upon going into the temple. Now remember what it was like to go into the temple. You had to go through all these different gates, right? These different areas. And eventually you'd get into the main sanctuary, where you've got these Levites doing music, and you've got these sacrifices going on with the smoke and the smell, and these Levites chanting, and all this stuff is going on. It's this big shamanic drama. We lost all that. So our sages took about 800 to 900 years to develop a siddur, an order of prayers. They reverse engineered what the experience was, and they created the liturgy, which, if you understand it and if you let it go through you, can take you to the same place of that unitary state of consciousness, that place that you experienced when you walked into the sanctuary and you heard all this and you experienced all of it. It's overflowing all of our senses. That's what the siddur is. That's what prayer is supposed to be for us. If we're honest, how often is it like that? Right? How often do we go through the prayer service and we go through it, but does it go through us at all? You sit in temple and it's like, okay, that's nice. Okay, maybe that's intellectually interesting, but it doesn't touch your soul. That happens all the time, doesn't it? That's not what prayer is supposed to be for us. Okay. We are different than other traditions in a lot of ways. One of the places we're very different from Christianity is in Christianity, there is one goal. The goal is to accept Jesus as your Christ into your heart, period. As a result, a pastor actually doesn't need to know anything, does he? Some do. Guys like Rob McCoy, guys who are knowledgeable guys do. But most pastors, honestly, are pretty ignorant. They don't study text. They don't study the Christian scriptures in Greek, which means they're studying someone else's interpretation. They don't study the Hebrew scriptures in Hebrew. They just pass on stories they've learned. And they try and be, who are the best preachers, right? I remember being with Reverend Shipp, who was the founding pastor of First AME Church. Have any of you ever been to AME? Do you know what it is? Okay. First AME, First AME is a African Methodist, but I had to speak after him at an interfaith experience at Loyola Marymount University. And I got up and I said exactly what I was feeling, which is, I don't know what to say because I feel like testifying. I don't even know what the hell I'm going to testify to. Because he spoke and it was so, you just get caught up in this rapture. That's not our tradition. Okay, it's not our tradition. Our tradition is to be caught up in that rapture through action and meditation and understand the text at a different level. It's very different. So the pastor can just say, this is what we're doing. And it doesn't matter what he does if he can get the congregant to accept Christ into their heart. Right? And you've been to churches. How many of you have been to churches? That's what it is, right? That's literally what the process is. So we're very different from that. We don't have that kind of, that's our intention. We do have sex. One of the things of Hasidism, which we'll study later in the year, is the idea to get so involved in what's called kavanah, an intention, that you lose yourself and you become part of the big self, a greater self. But normative Judaism is not about just taking God into your heart, because you figure God's already there. It's about being aware of the relationship. Make sense to everyone? Okay. Let's progress forward to, let's go hold on. Book of Genesis, chapter 17, because this is close to chapter 37. This is where we're going to start getting into where we are right now in the weekly Torah portion. So what happens in chapter 37 is we start getting this guy, Joseph. Okay? Who is Joseph? Joseph is one of the sons of Jacob, who has had an experience where he wrestled with God and changes his name. We didn't go over wrestling with God yet, did we? Let me go back a little bit. I'll go back before that. Let's go to Genesis chapter 32. Okay. So Jacob, let's just recap his story. He steals the birthright from his brother Esau. They're twins. Esau is the one who really doesn't care about religion or spirituality or God or anything else. He just cares about his own animalistic desires. So he comes in from a day of hunting, and Jacob is preparing the meal of consolation for his grandfather Abraham. He's preparing this meal, a Shiva meal, effectively. And Esau says, "I'm hungry, give me the beans." And Jacob says, "Well, no, they're for this meal." And he says, "No, I'll trade you. I'll sell you my birthright, and you can inherit everything." And so he does. Jacob accepts that deal. Now, Jacob ultimately Isaac's going to die. And so Jacob, with his mother's help, puts on furry arms. So he seems like he's like his brother, very hairy. Isaac says to his eldest son, and they're just minutes apart because they're twins. Isaac says to his son Esau, "Go out and get me my favorite meal, and then I will bless you to be the inheritor of, in charge of our family." Well, Esau goes and does that. Rachel prepares a meal. She puts on hairy stuff on his arms. Isaac is blind at the time. So Jacob comes and he says, "I'm here, I've got your meal." Isaac says, "Boy, that was fast. Come closer. You sound like Jacob, but you feel like you sound like Jacob, but you feel like Esau." And he blesses Jacob to be the heir. Esau comes in a little later, says, "Daddy, bless me." He goes, "I can't. I've already given everything to your brother." And so there's this betrayal between the two of them. There's this great anger. Now, Esau, we know his values were not what Jewish values became. B, he didn't care even about his grandfather's death. He only cared about his animalistic needs. So he certainly did not want him as a patriarch anyhow. But he sold it to Jacob. So now Jacob runs off, ends up marrying Rachel and Leah, gets 12 sons, does very well, and now he's going to come back to Canaan, back to Israel. And when he comes back, he has a dream. He has this experience. So let's go to chapter 32. And at this point, Jacob is preparing to fight he may have to be in a fight. He doesn't know what's going to happen. It's years later. He doesn't know how his brother's going to treat him. Would someone please read chapter 32, verse 25? I know those Tanakhs are very tiny little print.
That's where Jacob was left alone.
Yep.
And the man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he perceived that he could not overcome him, he struck the socket of his hip So Jacob's hip socket was dislocated as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn has broken."
So let's just back up for a second. He breaks the hip. The angel, it's an angel breaks, and some say it's God, some say it's just Jacob, having this dream with himself. But his hip socket gets broken. As a result, no meat that's around the sciatica is kosher meat, which is why you can't get kosher filet. Okay, because it's from the hip. So that's why you don't. Although now apparently there's a way by hand of taking out the sciatica from the hip so you can get kosher filet. But so he has that. Go on. You still there when we go? Dawn is broken.
And he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." He said to him, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." He said, "No longer will it be said that your name is Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with the divine and with man and have overcome."
So Yaakov means scoundrel. Literally means heel, like the heel of your foot. And just like we may say somebody's a heel as a negative term, it's saying his name meant heel, scoundrel. Instead, his name becomes Israel, which means he who wrestles and triumphs over God. Throughout the rest of history, sometimes Jews are referred to as Bnei Yaakov, the children of Jacob, and sometimes referred in the Tanakh as Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. So he's got two names. Why do we have different names for it? Yaakov, the heel, is a manipulator. He's able to go around things. He's circuitous. He knows how to be a con man. He knows how to, he does grafting of plants and animals when he's working for Laban. He shrewdly gets through things. Israel means wrestling. So when we're talking about a situation we're called children of Jacob, it means that we should figure out how to get around that situation without conflict. When it's Bnei children of Israel, it means that we need to go through it and have conflict. Make sense to everyone? Okay. Is that my phone? Oh, I left my phone on the chair, didn't I? It's okay. As long as I don't forget it. Thank you so much. Because you know me, I'll forget it and then I'll be lost. Thank you. So now his name is Israel. And when he does meet Esau, Esau says, "No big deal. I never really wanted the birthright anyhow. You don't need to give me anything. I'm good. You're good. Let's move on." Okay, so Jacob becomes the father of the people of Israel. Even though Abraham's the first Jew, Jacob's really the patriarch of our people. Because from him come the 12 sons, from him come all its progeny, etc. So Jacob is in charge of everything, and he has 12 sons. And one of his sons is a guy named Joseph. Now, Joseph has the JFK Jr. syndrome. Okay, Joseph is stunningly good looking. Joseph is talented. Joseph is daddy's favorite because it was from his favorite wife. Okay, and Joseph not only feels that way, he shows him that way. He says, he's got all these sons, but he gives Joseph this coat of many colors, this beautiful coat. And Joseph is his beloved one. This makes and Joseph's pretty arrogant about it all. You can imagine how this makes all of his older brothers feel. Okay? They're not exactly big Joseph fans. And then Joseph has this experience. If someone could turn to chapter 37, verse 5, and please read. Joseph interprets dreams. Joseph knows dreams. So 37, verse 5. Anyone who's got it. Doesn't matter. Somebody. You two haven't read, so one of you two.
Once Joseph had a dream, which he told to his brothers, and they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream, which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field, when suddenly my sheaf stood up and remained upright, and then your sheaves gathered around and bowed low to my sheaf." His brothers answered, "Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule over us?" And they hated him even more for his talk about his dreams. So
Joseph has a dream. Your 7 sheaves, all of your 12 sheaves of corn bow down. Your 11 sheaves of corn bow down to mine. Now they're irritated, but that's not enough. And this also teaches us of how dreams can be prophetic and what dreams are about. What else does he? He has another dream, doesn't he?
He dreamed another dream
See? I've read this before.
and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I've had another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." And when he told it to his father and brothers, his father berated him. "What," he said to them, "is this dream you have dreamed? Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow low to you to the ground?" So his brothers were wrought up at him, and his father kept the matter in mind.
Okay, so now they're all really angry. Nobody is particularly fond of Joseph, although Jacob's still good with him. Still his favorite. And Jacob's mother, or Joseph's mother, is dead, Rachel's dead. And so they go, and the boys go out, all of the boys, they're grown men. Joseph is 17 years old at the time. And they go out into the field, and the brothers are sick of him. They're tired of him. So they're going to kill him. And then some of the brothers say, no, we can't kill our own brother. That's not okay. So instead, they dig a pit, and they throw him in the pit. And then there's some Ishmaelites coming by. And they sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites as a slave. They say, "We're going to sell you as a slave." And they got to figure out, what are they going to do? Now they've gotten him out of his life. What are they going to do? So they go back to daddy. I say, "Oh, we were attacked." And when they were out there in the desert or in the field, they killed a goat and they put some goat blood on the coat. He said, "We were attacked by vicious beasts. Joseph fought them all off. He defended all this. He saved our 11 lives, but he died. All that's left of him is this coat with his blood on it." And everyone mourns. It's horrible. Now what happens to Joseph? Joseph then goes, and he's sold as a slave to a guy named Potiphar in Egypt. Goes down to Egypt, and he's sold as a slave to Potiphar. Now, who is Potiphar? Potiphar is the local business banker. Potiphar is very well off. And Potiphar very quickly makes Joseph into the head of his household. Why? Because Joseph is charismatic and good looking and very smart and intelligent. And Joseph really does everything with this, and we learn this Jewish value that whatever you do 100%, do the best you can. Most of the other slaves are like, you take the garbage out. As opposed to Joseph is, let me take the garbage out. So he becomes the head of the house. Problem with this is that Potiphar's got a wife. And her husband's away all the time making money in Egypt. And it's actually, they did a version of this that they made into a film with Donny Osmond being Joseph. And Potiphar's wife was played by Joan Collins.
Oh, God.
When she was like 45 or something. So she was still very hot. Okay. She was Joan Collins. And she says, well, come sleep with me. Have sex with me. He goes, I can't do that. You're my boss's wife. I don't do that kind of stuff. And he says, no. And one day, she's called him to come be with him. So obviously he comes, sits down on the divan, and she says, come have sex with me. He goes, no, not doing it. And who's to walk in but Potiphar? And what does she do? And this exact language is recapitulated and repeated almost verbatim when we're going to learn the story of Esther and Haman and Mordecai. Almost the exact same thing. You're going to find that the language in the Torah is repeated over and over in different ways. That's why we spend so much time on it. And so it's a recapitulation of the story in a different octave. Potiphar's coming up the stairs. She knows she's in trouble, and he's running off. He's trying to get out of her clutches. And she goes, help, help. He tried to rape me. Potiphar, being the less than aware man that he is incensed, blames Joseph. Joseph is thrown into prison. Okay. So now Joseph is in prison, and Potiphar's wife has slandered him. And we have chapter 40. Who would like to read the beginning of chapter 40? Again, this tells us something about Judaism. In Judaism, dreams are not fantasies. They might be prophetic, they might be insightful, they might be messages from God, but they are not fantasies. They have value. They are valuable. Who wants to read chapter 40? I think you're up.
And it happened after these things that the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and the baker transgressed against their master, against the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was enraged at his two quarters, the chamberlain of the cupbearers and the chamberlain of the bakers. And he placed them in the ward of the house of the chamberlain of the butchers into the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. The chamberlain of the butchers appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them, and they remained in the ward for a period of days. The two of them dreamt a dream. Each one had his dream on the same night, each one according to the interpretation of his dream. The cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison. Joseph came to them in the morning. He saw them, and behold, they were aggrieved. And he asked Pharaoh's quarters who were with him in the ward of his master's house, saying, "Why do you appear downcast today?" And they said to him, "We dreamt a dream, but there was no interpreter for it." So Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Relate it to me, if you please.
So in Judaism, there's a great line in Talmud. A dream left uninterpreted is like a letter left unopened. When you have a dream, you need to talk about it with somebody. Okay, you need to express it. Okay, go on. So he's going to interpret the dreams. What's he say?
Then the chamberlain of the cupbearers recounted his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, behold, there was a grapevine in front of me. On the grapevine were 3 tendrils, and it was as though it budded. The blossoms bloomed, and the clusters ripened into grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I placed the cup on Pharaoh's palm." Joseph said to him, "This is its interpretation. These 3 tendrils are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and will restore you to your post, and you will place Pharaoh's cup in his hand, as was the former practice when you were his cupbearer. If only you would think of me with yourself when he benefits you, and you will do me a kindness, if you please, and mention me to Pharaoh, then you would take me out of this building. For indeed, I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing for them to have put me in the pit."
So twice there, he's asking the cupbearer to remember him to Pharaoh. Okay, this becomes important. Go on.
The chamberlain of the bakers saw that he had interpreted well. So he said to Joseph, "I too, in my dream, behold, there were 3 wicker baskets. They were on my head, and in the upmost basket were all kinds of Pharaoh's food, baker's handiwork, and the birds were eating them from the basket above my head." Joseph responded and said, This is its interpretation. These 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head from you and hang you on a tree. Birds will eat your flesh from you. And it was on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all of his servants, and he counted the chamberlain of the cupbearers and the chamberlain of the bakers among his servants. He restored the chamberlain of the cupbearers to his cupbearing, and he placed the cup on Pharaoh's palm. But he hanged the chamberlain of the bakers, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chamberlain of the cupbearers did not remember Joseph, but he forgot him.
Let's go forget him for 2 years. Why? It's an important teaching in Judaism. My kids had their bar mitzvah, their b'nai mitzvah. Not just my kids, kids of any rabbi. It stinks. It's not fair. Because people expect that my sons at 13 are going to read the Torah the way I do. And that's not fair, is it?
No.
But that's the reality. They don't. 2 13-year-olds go up to do the bar mitzvah, right? One's the son of a lawyer, one's the son of a rabbi. Who do you expect is going to do better?
The lawyer.
Is it fair that the son of the rabbi should do better?
It should,
But it's not fair. It's
No.
not fair to the kid, right? We have different expectations, right or wrong, of different people. Judaism, one of its points is that we should have different expectations of people's behavior when they are knowledgeable, when they're adults. A lawyer goes and he has an affair. It's devastating. He ends up with a divorce, child custody, all those kind of things. Does it affect his job at the law firm? It really doesn't, does it? People will say, you're a scoundrel, but it really doesn't affect him. A minister goes and has an affair. He's going to lose his job, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we hold people to different standards. Okay? A rabbi is going to go smoke a cigar. Maybe not the best thing for him. Okay? A doctor of cardiopulmonary is going to go smoke a cigar. Who do you expect to be more conscious about how a cigar will affect you? The doctor, right? You treat him differently. And Joseph is this really wise being. He knows God. He interprets so beautifully. He should have faith, shouldn't he? But he doesn't. If he had faith in God, he wouldn't have to ask the cupbearer, "Get me out of here," would he? He would just have faith God's going to get him out when he's going to get him out. So the Midrash teaches us, the teachings about this, and Talmud teaches that he's kept there for 2 years because twice he asks. He places his faith in the cupbearer instead of in God. A rabbi or a minister, it doesn't mean that we don't have crises of faith. Anyone says that they don't ever have a crisis of faith is a liar or a fool or both, because that's how you deepen things, is by having questions. But one expects that a minister or a rabbi or a priest is going to be more comfortable with their faith than a politician, right? One of the problems is, let's look at our clergy. Certainly in Judaism, the vast majority of clergy, when you experience the vast majority of Jewish clergy, do you feel, wow, these are people of faith who are committed to the tradition, committed to Israel? Or do you feel, you know what, they're committed to other things? What's your experience, honestly? All too often it's the second, isn't it? And that wasn't always true. It's more true in American Judaism from the end of the 20th century on. So there is this whole teaching that we should hold ourselves to a higher standard, to the best that we can be. I can be better than my 15-year-old sons. They should not be held. I should not hold them to the same standard I hold myself, nor should I hold myself to the standard I hold them. Right? It should be harder. I better have more wisdom than my 15-year-olds, no matter what they think. So this is, again, a primary teaching in Judaism, that everyone is judged for who they are and where they are in life, not from some sort of, here's the one definition for all. This gets manifest in a deeper understanding theologically. Everyone has their own relationship with God, and no one person's is any better or deeper than anyone else's. The rabbi, the minister, in our tradition, the rabbi, the gabbai, the cantor, the janitor, the lawyer, the politician. The rabbi doesn't have a better relationship with God than the politician. That's not our belief. Our belief is that we all have our own unique individual relationship, and we need to be the best version of ourselves. I'm not, Reb Zusia, this great Hasidic mystic, said, when I get to heaven, they're not going to ask me, why was I not a better version or more like Moses? They're going to ask me, why was I not a better version of myself? That's a deep Jewish theology, which means, if you keep extrapolating from that, if you keep extending the argument, it means that you have just as a valid an opinion of the text as you do, right? As I do, as you do. And so it becomes about studying together, since God is infinite, to understand a deeper level. Okay? You have the opportunity of seeing God in animals. Okay, because you're a vet. You have the opportunity of seeing God in the digestive system. I mean, the miracles, what you studied, it's pretty miraculous, right? It is, unless it's my stomach system, in which case it's just a nightmare. That's right. But it's right. You have the experience of dance. So is one the only version of God? No. Judaism recognizes that it's all valid and it's all valuable. And we study together with the idea that everyone inputs their own relationship with God. Since God is infinite, we can all learn from each other. That's why Jews argue so much, because it's encouraged. The idea that our machlochet, our debate, is all for the sake of heaven. And God's infinite. So why should God only be seen through dance, or only through animals, or only through the digestive system, right? Or only through text? The idea is that it's all of the above, okay? And so we encourage, Judaism encourages that dialogue. It's called studying with chavruta. That's what God type of friends. All right. Who wants to read chapter 41, verse 1? Poor little Pharaoh. Now, I want to just point out something. If you take the word Pharaoh and you spell it differently, you spell it one way, it means you take the letters and you spell them. The word Pharaoh means ruler of Egypt. But that there's a consonant, you can transpose the letters, and it spells Perah, which means the evil mouth. So the Pharaoh here is Pharaoh. Pharaoh come Exodus is going to be the evil mouth. Okay? Who wants to read about Pharaoh on chapter 41, verse 1?
It happened at the end of 2 years to the day. Pharaoh was dreaming that, behold, he was standing over the river. When behold,
Right, so
out
2
of the
years,
river,
2 years to the day because of what Joseph did. His own mistake. Go on.
when behold, out of the river there emerged 7 cows of beautiful appearance and robust flesh, and they were grazing in the marshland. Then behold, 7 other cows emerged after them out of the river, of ugly appearance and gaunt flesh, and they stood next to the cows on the bank of the river. The cows of ugly appearance and gaunt flesh ate the 7 cows of beautiful appearance and robust, and Pharaoh awoke. He fell asleep and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of grain were sprouting on a single stalk, healthy and good. And behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, were growing after them. Then the thin ears swallowed up the 7 healthy and full ears. Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it had been a dream.
So he has these 2 dreams. And then if we look at verse number 9, it says, the chamberlain of the cupbearer spoke up before Pharaoh. My transgressions do I mention today. Pharaoh has become incensed to his servants and placed me in the ward of the house of the chamberlain of butchers, me and the chamberlain of the bakers. We dreamed a dream on the same night, and it happened. So at that point, Pharaoh's all upset. He doesn't know what's going on. He's had these 2 horrible dreams. And at that point, the cupbearer suddenly remembers, hey, Pharaoh, there's this guy in prison I knew. Really good at interpreting dreams. Maybe he can help you out. So Joseph comes out. How many of you have seen the play or the movie of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat? Oh, this is a great scene. It's Pharaoh comes out and Joseph says, no, will you teach me? And Pharaoh is an Elvis impersonator. And he starts going, I was wandering along the banks of the Nile when 7 fat cows came up out of the Nile. Bop, shawada, wada, bop, shawada, wada. And right behind came 7 healthy animals. It's actually really fun. And Pharaoh has these dreams and Joseph interprets them. He knows what they mean. And Joseph is a very shrewd, brilliant, wise man. Okay? He's now in his mid to late 40s, mid-40s roughly. And he says, Pharaoh, what the dreams mean is there's going to be 7 years of plenty. And then it's going to be followed immediately by 7 years of drought, famine. And what you need to do is you need to store everything during the 7 good years. So when 7 bad years come, Egypt is prepared. And by the way, Pharaoh, what would really, really help you is if you had a second in command, someone who is insightful, someone who's charismatic, someone who's intelligent. Thank you. Look. And Pharaoh makes him his number 2. Okay? Pharaoh says, this is a really great idea. We're going to see how accurate you are, but you're going to run this program. So for the next 7 years, Joseph is now number 2 to Pharaoh. And he starts rationing. He starts putting store cities together. He starts keeping, a portion of the wonderful stuff that's happening. Puts away the grain. He puts away all these things. And then comes 7 years of famine. And it's the whole region. It's not just Egypt. And so what's going to happen? Well, let me talk about first of all with Joseph. Well, no, we'll come back to that. Let's do this part first. So in Canaan, in Israel, there's also a famine. And Joseph's brothers are like, it's 2 years into it. This is miserable. We even missed Joseph's dreams. This is horrible. But, we hear there's plenty of food in Egypt. Let's go to Egypt. And they go to Egypt, where they're brought before the number 2 guy, Pharaoh. They don't recognize him. This is almost 30 years later. Actually, it's 49. It's 32 years later. They don't recognize Joseph. It doesn't look like the 17-year-old kid that they threw in a pit. They assume is dead. And they say to him, Joseph, or they don't call him Joseph, the vizier, we want food. And he recognizes that they're all there except they're all half-brothers, except his only real brother, which was Benjamin. Benjamin had the same mom. He says, is your whole family here? And they go, well, there's another one that's still a Canaan. He goes, well, bring him too. And so they go back, come back, and now all the brothers are there. And they say, and Joseph says, I'm going to give you food, I'm going to take care of you, and it's all a test. This is also another issue. God is always testing us, pushing our limits. Not in terms of seeing if we pass or fail, but for us to learn how to be better versions of ourselves. And so he goes, and as they get everything, he's the viceroy, and he sneaks his favorite little golden cup into the sack of Benjamin. And they all got food now. They're about to leave. And Benjamin says, wait a minute, my little cup is missing. And so they search all the bags. And it's found in Benjamin's bag. And so they say, you know what? This is, we're sorry, this can't be. He goes, take him, he's going to prison. And all the brothers, rather than looking out for themselves, they've changed. And they pray before Joseph, please take me, don't take him. Again, a fabulous song. That's a calypso song in that particular show. Oh no, not he. Benjamin is straighter than the big palm tree. They leave him. Okay, it's fabulous. And so he now realizes that Benjamin is not the thief, but more important, he always knew that, but more importantly, that his brothers have changed. They're not only concerned with themselves, they're concerned with each other. And so he who did not give up on, who never gave up on his brothers, says, okay, you're my brothers, and you're all okay because I'm your brother. And they go, you're a liar. We don't believe you. So he removes everyone. And could someone please look at chapter 45, verse 1? Can someone please read?
Now Joseph could not restrain himself in the presence of all who stood before him. So he called out, remove everyone from before me. Thus no one remained with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers.
How did he make himself known to his brothers? They don't believe he's their brother. What did he do? Go on. He dropped his drawers. Because the only ones circumcised are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he showed his pee-pee. Okay, I think that's the technical medical term, isn't it? And
Dangly bits.
it showed his, yeah. So they recognize him. He says, come back to Egypt with me. Come be with Egypt. Bring dad. You'll live really well. And so they do. They bring their whole family and their friends and the whole clan. It's year 2 in this family. There's 5 more years. Joseph's family, they're all doing pretty well, aren't they? Right? Life is pretty darn good for them. They're the family of the viceroy. They've got plenty to eat. And he gives them jobs too. Well, help out, you know? Now let's take it back from the Egyptian model. Pharaoh is the only one with food. Okay? So you have a child, grown now. You have a child. No, you do. Okay. It's 2 children. And you got no food. First year, you go up to Pharaoh, in this case, Joseph and his family. His family's not there. First year, you say, look, we need food. I need to keep my baby alive. I will do anything. Okay. You're going to take a debt. You're going to owe me interest. You know, if it gets better, you'll pay me back more. Now, the second year, you don't have anything left. You say, okay. I'll give you the food for your baby, but I want your land. I own your land. You're basically sharecroppers. You going to do it? That's your only choice to keep your child alive? Do it, won't you? By the time you get through the 7 years, in order to keep your child alive, you would enslave yourself, wouldn't you? Right? That's just what we do. So now you have all these people who are now, all the land has now been confiscated by Pharaoh. All of the assets have been confiscated by Pharaoh. And everyone's a slave to Pharaoh. And who's going to get blamed? The outsider Joseph, because he's the one doing it all, isn't he? Right? This takes us to a place of understanding, and historians and anthropologists actually talk about, I think it's the Xerxes and Antaxerxes regimes or whatever it is of the Egyptians. there's a revolution that takes place. A new pharaoh is put on the throne. How does that new pharaoh feel about everyone who's involved with the old pharaoh? Doesn't feel very good, does he? Moreover, especially Joseph's family, who are outsiders to begin with because they're from Israel, are they going to be treated well, or are they going to be enslaved now? Right? How is al-Julani going to treat supporters of Assad? Going to kill him, right? He's going to do everything bad to him. It's no different than what happens in Egypt these thousands of years ago. New regime. They take the old regime and they're going to throw them out. And that's why when we get to the book of Exodus, when it talks about the Jews being enslaved, it says, and there arose a Pharaoh who knew not of Joseph. Because he didn't know Joseph. He didn't care about Joseph. He only knew them as our persecutors and they're now our slaves. Does that make sense how we went from being at the top of the food chain to being at the bottom of the food chain in Egypt? Okay, that's how it happens politically. Okay, so everything's great for Joseph, and then we have this really interesting thing that happens. That's really it's really fabulous. It's in this week's Torah portion, actually. If we turn to chapter 47, Parsha Vayachi, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. The days of Jacob were 147 years. Approached him to die, and so he's going to bless all of his sons. Gives all of them the different blessings. And then he's going to get to his final request in chapter 49, verse 29. Where he's going to be saying, when he dies, he wants to be buried in the cave of Machpelah. What is the cave of Machpelah? Abraham bought this cave from Ephraim the Hittite. Even Ephraim wanted to give it to him, he said, no, I'm going to pay for it so that it's mine forever. And the cave of Machpelah, Abraham's buried, Isaac is buried, and Jacob says, bury me in that cave. Bury me in our family plot. Commit to me you're going to do that. And they say yes. And now please read chapter 50. Before we go to this, I want to explain something about the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar, which is much older than the Gregorian calendar, is a lunar calendar with solar adjustments. So instead of having a leap day every 4 years, we have a leap month. It's like 7 out of 13 years or 13 out of 22. It's some complicated system. So Passover is always going to be in spring. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are always going to be in fall. But Passover might be as early as March or as late as mid to late April. Okay? That's why. But we adjust it so it's always sometime in spring. Okay. Jacob is associated with the holiday of Sukkot. The temporary structures that we build. Why? Jacob finds God in buildings. Jacob finds God in structure. Abraham finds God and experiences God on mountaintops. Isaac in a field. We have different text that backs that up. Isaac meditates in a field. Rebecca meets him for the first time. He's doing that. He's so glowing with different colored lights. She falls down off her donkey and passes out. Abraham has an experience where he almost kills his son on a mountaintop, and God talks to him. Jacob is in building and structure. Jacob, then the holiday of Sukkot, Jacob is both born and died on the first day. Okay? Which is the 15th day of the month of Tishrei. Okay? Just keep that aside. Now, someone please read chapter 50, the first lines. Go on, somebody.
Joseph flung himself upon his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph ordered the physicians in his service to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed his wrath.
Embalming is allowed in Judaism.
It required 40 days, for such is the full period of embalming. The Egyptians bewailed him 70 days, and when the wailing period was over, Joseph spoke to the Pharaoh's court, saying, do me this favor, and lay this appeal before Pharaoh. My father made me swear, saying, I am about to die. Be sure to bury me in the grave which I made ready for myself in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, let me go up and bury my father. Then I shall return. And Pharaoh said, go up and bury your father as he made you promise on oath.
keep going. So 70 days, Pharaoh agrees he's going to do it. And so now what's going to happen?
So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the officials of Pharaoh, the senior members of his court, and all of Egypt's dignitaries, together with all of Joseph's household, his brothers and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the region of Goshen. Chariots too and horsemen went up with him. It was a very large troop. When they came to Goren Ha'atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they held there a very great and solemn lamentation, and he observed a mourning period of 7 days for his father.
Okay, so first, so 70 days later, he goes and he talks to Pharaoh, and then he has a day of travel. The actual term in the Hebrew means he ordained a 7-day mourning period for his father. Okay? So plus 7. Ordaining means it's for all time. If it is ordained that we will always light a candle on Friday night, it means that's forever, right? That's ordaining something. So 70 days after Jacob dies, he dies on the 15th of Tishrei, is the 25th day of the month of Kislev. Okay? Then he has a 1 + 7 day festival, right? So he's an 8-day festival ordained to begin on the 25th day of Kislev. With me? Okay. 25th day of Kislev today is observed as the first day of Hanukkah. So this is to explain what it confuses people because they don't bother thinking. And when I first learned this, I was blown away. And then I talked to friends. Every Orthodox rabbi I knew, and I know some very good ones, they knew this. Every conservative and reform guy I knew had no idea. Because we don't think in terms of the Jewish calendar. We think in terms of the Gregorian calendar, right? So it's right there in the text, but we don't think about it that way. If I said it's the 4th Thursday of the month of November, what is that holiday? Thanksgiving. If Christmas is on a Sunday, what day is New Year's? Always, isn't it? Okay. Because we know our calendar. But we don't think of the Jewish calendar, which is much older. Our ancestors observed a holiday for 8 days, beginning on the 25th day of Kislev, of mourning for Jacob. What do we do when we mourn someone? What do we do on their anniversary of their death that we mourn them?
Light candles.
We light a yard site, don't we? Right? So our ancestors are doing this. 1,000 years later, the Hashmoneans take over the temple, right? They get it back. They rededicate the temple. Hanukkah means dedication. And this one flask of oil for 1 day lasts 8 days. And so we have this 8-day festival. And they take it over on the 25th of Kislev. So it's, now whether it really happened on the 25th of Kislev or it happened around the same time, and they said, okay, we already had one holiday on the States, we're going to combine them. Or if it happened on the exact same dates, Hanukkah is a double holiday. It's 2 holidays. It's 2 different observances combined because it's happened on the same dates, combined in the same holiday. So what's another proof text of this? There are 2 major blessing formulas in Hebrew, in our tradition. The first is, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu, fill in the blank. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to light the Sabbath lights, light the Hanukkah lights. Then there's the formula, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, do whatever. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who brought forth fruit from the vine, who created fruit from the vine, who brought forth bread from the earth, who, etc. How do you know where each blessing comes from? If it has, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to fill in the blank, then it's biblical. Okay? It comes from a biblical source. We are commanded to wash. We are commanded to say a blessing after meals. We are commanded to light our Hanukkah candles or light our Sabbath candles. He ordains in the Torah this 8-day blessing. Right? So the root of it is right here, this 8-day memorial. Is everyone with me? So we have 2 blessings we say every Hanukkah, don't we? besides the Shacharyana, which we say the first night. We have one that says, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to kindle the lights of Hanukkah," lights of dedication. That is because of Jacob. The first blessing, which is built, the Hashmonaeus, the Maccabees, happened long after this book is done, right? They happened in the 2nd century before the Common Era. That's long after this is done. The first blessing is because the biblical reference is Jacob. Then the second blessing, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who did wondrous things for our ancestors in days of old," of this season, is about the Maccabees. So Hanukkah actually has it's a double holiday. And it's even in the Talmud referred to and called a little Sukkot, because it's, again, 8 days, and it's all connected to Sukkot. So what is Sukkot? Sukkot is a holiday about structure, building, finding God within buildings and structures. And it's got to be a temporary structure we dwell in, right, for those 8 days. What's the one thing you can't have in a sukkah? An Ner Tamid, an eternal light. Because it's a temporary structure. Okay? You're building, who's ever done a remodel on their house or built a house or knows anything about that? Okay. Little one. So you start off with just the basic frame, right? And then you start building it all, and you start adding the different things. When are you done? When you turn on the lights, right? We have a 70-day period between first night of Sukkot and Hanukkah. And it is an opportunity to build a temple. I don't mean a temple, although that could be it, but I mean building whatever you want to build in your life. That's what those 70 days are about. You start with the structure of Sukkot. You keep building step by step by step by step by step, whatever you want to create, whether it's relationship, money, business, whatever it is. Keep going all the way to Hanukkah. And that's when you're turning on lights. That's when you're dedicating what that building is for. Hanukkah, as kids, we think it's important because we get gifts. Then we become adults and we think, oh, it's unimportant. It's just about some oil that lasted so long. And then when you study, you realize, wait a minute, this is really important. It's all about building structure. It's about the faith with Jacob and all that he created. And it's also about the military victory. Let's be clear. Hanukkah is not about the oil as much as it is about the fact that we kicked the butts of the Seleucid Greeks, whom outnumbered us, outgunned us, everything else. And, if the world remembered Hanukkah, what happened to the Greeks, Israel would never be attacked. Okay? Because who's I with someone? And shortly after October, and he said, last year, and he said, I pity Hamas. I said, why do you say that? He goes, they picked a war with Israel, and it doesn't matter about anything else. Israel's got God on their side. Okay? Which is true. The Iron Dome is not our great protector. God is our protector. And so all of this is there from Hanukkah, and it's all there from both Jacob and Sukkot. And so you see how this book even details what Hanukkah is about. But it's right there in plain sight. But I will tell you, I couldn't find one non-ultra-Orthodox guy who knew this, because they don't think in those dates. They don't think of it. Wasn't, they knew that Jacob was born and died in Sukkot, but they never pieced together 70 days after Sukkot, beginning of Sukkot, the beginning of Hanukkah. It never combined for them. So Joseph goes on. He does all this. He lives. He dies in Egypt. He and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. He saw 3 generations through Ephraim. Even the sons Machir, son of Manasseh, were raised on Joseph's knees. He said to his brothers, which means some of them were alive as well, I am about to die, but God will surely remember you and bring you out of the land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph adjured his children, the children of Israel, saying, when God will indeed remember you, then you must bring my bones out of here. Joseph died at the age of 110. They embalmed him, and he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Hazak, Hazak, Hazek. Be strong, will be strengthened. They then take that coffin, and he's been asked to be buried in his land. So they take the coffin, and when they become slaves, they don't want that coffin desecrated, and so they put it and hide it in the Nile underwater. Okay, which is going to cause a problem when they have the Exodus, because how are you going to take Joseph's coffin? And so one of the things that Moses and Aaron do is they call out to the Nile, Joseph, you would come with us. And the coffin floats up, and they take the bones and the coffin of Joseph back into Israel on their 40-year journey. How many of you saw the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston?
Oh, yeah.
I must have, but I don't remember.
It used to be on every Easter.
Yeah. And I remember that.
Used to be on every Easter.
Yeah.
Used to be that, and the other movie that used to be on every Easter was Ben-Hur,
Yes.
which was amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
You may remember that because they take it from that when the Hebrews are leaving Egypt after the 10th plague, there's a scene where they're carrying the bones of Joseph, and there are people singing about it, and because that was really important. So that's how we get to the place of the beginning of the book of Exodus, which literally starts that there arose, by verse 8, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know of Joseph. Okay, so it's how we get to that position of, we go into Egypt and we become royalty, but then we become slaves because of what we helped. Let's be clear. Joseph wasn't saying, "Oh, you want the food? We got lots here. Go take some food. Have some food for your kids." Joseph was saying, "You want some food? What are you going to give me?" Right? And we paid the price for that, and we end up becoming slaves. And God does redeem us, and that's where we end the book of Bereshit, the beginning of the book. So these stories we've studied over the last number of weeks of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob, now a little bit of Jacob and of Joseph, are all stories that are crucial to understanding what's going to happen in the next 4 books of the Torah and what's going to happen throughout Jewish history. So I don't worry about certain things. I may worry about the pain that we have to experience to get to a certain place, but there's no question in my mind that Israel will always exist. That's not a question. It may be painful at times, and this is something when we get to Talmud we will study as well. The book of Judges has the same story repeated over and over. Book of Judges, we're fast forwarding now. After the Exodus, we're in Israel. And each of the different tribes, the descendants of the tribes, have a different place in Israel. Okay? And then they start to fight within each other. And more importantly, even besides the bickering, they forget that they are there by the goodness of God. They do what is evil in God's sight. That's the phrase. So God sends someone to go to war with them and beat them. And it gets bad in my last 8 years, my last 22 years. And it gets so bad that then the Hebrews, the Jews, then cry out, God send us a redeemer. And God sends a shofet, a judge, Deborah, Samson, Gideon, these different guys who become spiritual military leaders, beat the aggressor off, and then everyone's happy. But then what happens within a generation or two? The people forget what happened. They do what's evil in the eyes of God. Wash, rinse, repeat. Okay, that's exact, and that happens over and over and over. We do fine until we start acting in ways we shouldn't act. On October 6th of 2023, how many Jews that you know did not even relate to Judaism? They were C&E Catholics, Christian Easter Catholics. They were 2-day-a-year Jews. They're going to come to Rosh Hashanah for an hour. Doesn't matter what hour. They're going to come for 1 hour. Not 1 hour, 1 minute. They're going to get up and leave after an hour, wherever they go. Okay? This is where so many Jews were on October 6th. On October 8th, 99% of Jews were not in that place anymore. Right? Everyone was aware we're Jews. Sad and painful part was that by December 8th, It's back to the way it was for the majority of them. Not for all. Some changed. Some chose to realize Israel's a priority. It's the first line of defense. All different things like that. And so they woke up and they stayed awake. But for a whole bunch, they do not even think about what happened October 7th. I look exhausted because I am exhausted, because every day other than Shabbat, I'm up at 3 a.m. writing an email. Okay? Because we need to be conscious and remember what happened. And if every rabbi wrote one email a week, I wouldn't feel compelled I need to write every day. Unfortunately, if you're Orthodox, you're talking about it every morning when you daven together, when you pray together. If conservative Reform, it's out of your consciousness. Let's just make peace. Let's forget about what they did. It's not that big a deal. They don't really hate us. They just want peace and prosperity too. That's just not the case. It's just not the case. We're going to talk about it on Wednesday at Talmud and Tobacco. But we'll talk about the issue of what does the Quran really say. They are not interested in peace.
I'm reading this book at the moment called If It Takes 1,000 Years. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's the guy who was in the military, our military here, and was in Afghanistan and a lot of different places, and was an interrogator for insurgents, radicals, whatever you want to call it.
Terrorists.
Terrorists, yeah. And he said that line, the title, was some Afghani that he interrogated, and he said, you know that you're not going to be doing anything anymore. You're going to be incarcerated forever or worse. Doesn't matter. My son will take over. If it takes 1,000 years,
yeah, that's people don't understand what the Quran really says, and that's why we're doing this class on Wednesday as well, because the Quran is not in any way, shape, or form a book of religion or theology. It is a book about how to dominate the world.
mm-hmm.
Okay, period. And we think that everyone wants what we want, peace and prosperity. That is not what the Quran teaches. It's not what the Hadiths teach. It's just not that. It's not, and we'll go over it on Wednesday. There's a lot of examples. It just isn't what the text is. It's not about deepening your relationship with God. It's about subservience to Allah, and that the Quran is the absolute perfect word of Allah. And you know how we know that? We know that because it says it's the absolute perfect word of Allah. So we know it's perfect because it says it's perfect. Isn't that great logic? And if you're not that kind of Muslim, then where you live by that, by all sorts of things, you are an infidel, whether you're a Jewish infidel, a Christian infidel, a Muslim infidel. Infidels are meant to be killed, converted, or enslaved, period, end of report. That's the way it is. That is a very different philosophy than we want peace and prosperity for our neighbor. And until Americans and Westerners recognize that if it takes 1,000 years is the attitude, then you can't combat it. There is not a desire for that. So we're going to go into that on Wednesday a little bit, but this is a book of theology. It's a book of how to deepen your life, a book of meditation and action. So the world becomes a better place, not a book of world domination. Israel doesn't have a desire to conquer the Middle East, make everybody Jewish, or anything else like that, do they? So, Wednesday night class at 7:30. It's actually going to be at our house, in our garage, so we can have heaters and warm while people smoke cigars and have pizza and have alcohol. In the garage. Yeah. So.
Not the stone house then.
No, we're going to do it because people have told Orlando that they're just cold there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a cold night, and so we'll do it there. It's no big deal. It's not. We're just putting it out on the website that it's at a private home. We're not putting that it's at my private home, but that's where it is. We'll have cigars, non-smoking area, and we'll have pizzas and alcohol, and study about war and peace and allies and enemies and the Quran and all that. We'll have politics not from the pulpit. So, any questions on what we say tonight? Especially with the two of you, because I went through a lot very fast.
Are you still videoing? Is it still videoing? Never ever.
Well, you can take off the video. Why don't you turn off the video? We'll call that a night for that.